you guys? So welcome on back to a brand new episode. He's wandering off already. He's already over it. Oh, here he is. He hears people outside, so now he's gonna guard me. Again, welcome on in, guys. For today's video, we're going to be diving in and taking a bit of a close look at two movies. We're not going to go super in depth. We're going to more talk about them kind of in like a bigger picture sense, because I think the two films that we have are a good comparison when discussing these movies in the way that we're going to. Now, I do want to preface this by saying I enjoy both of these movies very much. Yes, I'm going to be talking about one in relation to the other being better, just in terms of its representation. But aside from that, I do enjoy both of these movies. We are going to be talking about The Taking of Deborah Logan, and then after that, we're also going to talk about The Visit. They both came out around relatively the same time. Taking of Deborah Logan came out in 2014. The Visit was in 2015. While they are certainly not the first or only movies to bring up the conversation of ageism and ableism, I do think they're a great duo to like compare in the modern era. Some of the literature that I'll be referring to, we will talk about this, but only a little bit. In A Companion to the Horror Film, this book, it more so dives into the aspect of disability within horror. So that's kind of what we're going to be touching on. And yeah, I'm going to try to do this as clearly as possible. And then we'll also be referencing Julia Kristeva as well. It's a lot to kind of break down and break apart. We're not going to do like a whole history lesson here, but let's just get into it. So, The Taking of Deborah Logan, released in 2014, directed by Adam Robitel, also written by, produced by Bad Hat Harry Productions, and distributed by Eagle Films. Now, I do think this is more of a lower budget kind of movie. It is and it isn't. Like, there is some special effects in this that actually kind of hold up. But I also think the first person POV, found footage kind of vibe of it also adds to that. And the basic rundown is Mia records the daily lives of Deborah and her daughter, Sarah, as part of her thesis. As the days progress, strange things happen around Deborah, and it becomes apparent something has taken control of her. Jill Larson stars as Deborah Logan, Anne Ramsey is Sarah Logan, Michelle Ang is Mia Medina, Ann Bedian is Dr. Nazir, and Brett Gentile is Gavin. Diving right on in, I do want to, give the preface that The Taking of Deborah Logan, it does such a good job depicting Deborah's disability, but then also diverting itself from that so that there aren't like negative connotations being put onto the real life disability in the movie. It's not very quick, but it's kind of a quick shift from this is something more than just classic Alzheimer's. We see a bit of it, but they don't treat Deborah like she's an outcast or she's some other. They do in some aspects, but then in others, it's also like she still is able to hold on to her humanity as a character, even far down the line once basically all humanity is gone. There's still some there. You still feel it for her because she is just a victim to it all, like, everyone else. And that is so strongly asserted in this movie. Whereas in The Visit, I feel like it's not. That's more so what plays into the trope of like old people equals scary. And that's something that we've relied on as a trope for a long time. I think it goes back to like witch imagery and witch folklore, specifically around the perception of aging single women and that fear or paranoia that even just the concept of a woman living on her own could bring to a civilization. While obviously we're not in witch trial days anymore, so to speak, it still carries on that narrative, specifically the imagery of witches usually looking like old women. While it might not be the explicit intent for that character, it does create kind of like a subconscious cultural identity around it that I think can, kind of reach out and start affecting people more in their everyday lives. So we're just going to do like quick synopsis on it. Mia Hu, Gavin, and Lewis are a team of students who want to create a documentary about Deborah Logan, an elderly woman with Alzheimer's disease living with her daughter.
The story of Alzheimer's is never about one person. My PhD I'm gonna start again.
As the film crew records her daily life, Deborah starts to exhibit increasingly bizarre actions that her personal physician states are normal for someone with an aggressive form of Alzheimer's. However, cameraman Lewis begins to notice that her actions defy normal explanations and expresses concern that something supernatural is occurring.
Hey, letting all my heat out.
So that's that shift that I was talking about. This is a very emotional movie, and the depictions of Deborah's mental state is heartbreaking if you've had to deal with a loved one who had Alzheimer's or anything like that. When I first watched this when I was in college, it really emotionally affected me because it's such a brutally honest portrayal, but I do believe it's done in a very sympathetic way. I did have some issues in the very beginning because, like, it's kind of a bit of the trope of, like, they remember things and then their caregiver, whoever, is trying to bring them back to reality, which also is kind of not agreed upon nowadays. If they're stuck in this little like time loop kind of, and they think my husband's going to be home in a little bit, I need to have dinner ready, you would kind of more so feed into it rather than make them relive the trauma of, one, not just being able to remember, but the trauma of losing that person as well, making them relive that over and over. But we should recognize, this was made in 2014. So even though that's a little over 10 years ago, a lot has changed still. But they do such a good job at keeping Deborah's humanity intact. You don't at any point, even when she has full on shifted into this other monster of a thing, there's still that humanity that you feel for her. And that is not portrayed in The Visit. In The Visit, there is reference to Hansel and Gretel, the idea of witches being alongside imagery of like aging women or aging women with mental health issues, stuff like that. I just don't think it plays into it in an appropriate way. And it's kind of a constant theme. Not constant, I would say, but it's a reoccurring theme with M. Night Shyamalan's work. If y'all saw the movie Old, I mean, in the title alone. And it was very much just like aging bad. So I don't know what his thing is with it. I enjoy M. Night Shyamalan's movies for the most part. Like I thought The Village was incredible. Some of these though, I don't know. I still like The Visit. Like I said, I still like it. But there's just something about it that rubs me the wrong way. And it treats the elderly villains in it more as spectacles. And it really asserts that othering aspect between the kids and the grandparents. And that's directly what Kristeva talks about, but also in A Companion to the Horror Film, it talks about that othering as well, and how specifically it happens with disabled and queer bodies. We can get into that more a little bit later on. I want to get through Deborah Logan, but in Deborah Logan also there is a queer character, and you see that like dynamic. It's Sarah Logan, Deborah's daughter. So I do find it very interesting that they decided to specifically have the othering experience of disability, add that in with the othering experience of queerness, which are both directly referenced in these writings. So I just found that interesting. Things grow more tense after Lewis and Gavin record audio of Deborah speaking in French, talking about sacrifices and snakes. They notice that the line for 337 at her switchboard continually rings. The line belonged to local physician Henry Desjardins, who disappeared after a series of cannibalistic ritualized murders of 4 young girls. It does kind of take like a true crime twist here or there. Deborah's behavior becomes so extreme that she is hospitalized for her own safety. Dismayed, Gavin quits the film.
That's call, man. You need this paycheck as much as I do, man. Please don't leave.
To be a team player.
Fuck
No.
both of you. Gavin.
Most relatable character ever in a freaking movie. He's like, no, I'm out of here. And he leaves. The others discovered that Desjardins was supposedly trying to recreate an ancient Monachan ritual that would make him immortal, but required the deaths of 5 girls that recently had their first period. Now, I do find that interesting as well, the kind of like dichotomy between beginning of life, end of life, and how it's manipulated by this thing that ultimately does take over Deborah. They wonder whether Deborah is possessed by Desjardins. Sarah, Mia, and Lewis discover that Deborah had unsuccessfully tried to abduct Cara Minetti, a young cancer patient. At the hospital, Deborah's friend visits her and she begs him to kill her. He tries to comply but is knocked out by the entity possessing her. Sarah learns from Harris that years ago, Deborah found out that Desjardins planned to use Sarah as his 5th victim. It had prompted her to murder the doctor before he could accomplish his plan, and she buried his body in the yard. The group finds the body's remains and tries to burn them, but fails when Desjardins' spirit intervenes. Now, I know it sounds very fantastical and it goes from like reality to fantasy world kind of very quickly. I think that's good. I normally would not necessarily like that, such a hard shift, but when you're dealing with such a sensitive topic, it needed to be done, or else there were going to be negative connotations being put onto Deborah's character and then therefore the idea surrounding this disease. And I just think they were very, very mindful of that. They really took that into consideration. And even if they didn't, beautiful, because it steered so far away from reality that you were almost no longer even thinking about Alzheimer's, you know, and neither even were the doctors. They interviewed doctors and all that, medical professionals. They even quickly start asserting, like, I don't think this is Alzheimer's. It is not like, it's not behaving how Alzheimer's usually behaves within the brain, within the body. And so it really asserts that this is not that disordered disease. And I do appreciate that. Because once again, then the aspect of other that's now being put onto Deborah isn't one of disability. You know, it's one of paranormal, which isn't real. Like snake demons and shit in this sense. Not real. Don't gotta worry about that. But there is real life horror and trauma connected to disability, especially with aging. So I do think that it was very considerate to diverge away from the reality of the narrative, I guess. Deborah succeeds in abducting Cara and taking her to the location where Desjardins had killed his previous victims. After discovering Deborah has gone into the mines, Sheriff Linda Tweed follows behind, only to be killed. Sarah and Mia find Deborah as she is trying to swallow Cara's head in a snake-like manner. and manage to burn Desjardins' corpse. Sarah and the reconscious Deborah reunite. The film then cuts to news footage of reporters stating that Deborah was deemed unfit to stand trial for her crimes and abduction of Kara. Her health having deteriorated rapidly in the months following the incident, Kara has overcome her cancer and is celebrating her 10th birthday. As the reporter begins to wrap up the story, Kara turns to the camera and gives a sinister smile, implying that Desjardins is now possessing her. So there is that little, like, whoo, at the end. But I also really love that the disabled, sick person did not have to die for the horror for everyone else to end. Because that's also a classic trope that is used in a lot of movies, where obviously a character or a presence, a being, is there to represent a mental disability, mental disorder, mental illness, anything like that. And the person battling that thing has to die for that thing to die as well. I don't like that trope. I don't like it. Especially like in Lights Out, that movie, they made it explicitly like, no, sick person has to pew themselves in order to save everyone else. Did not like that. I find this movie to be a great representation for how to do aging and the fears associated with that, but also not villainize it, you know? Whereas The Visit by M. Night Shyamalan, I don't know as though they necessarily successfully did that. This one, it just more so goes to talk about the use of excrement in movies, and how that is a form of abjection. The Visit does go into that, which I do love them for that. The poop scene, and just the poop in general, it gagged the fuck out of me. I mean, I was not ready for a lot of the scenes involving diapers and whatnot, and it turned abjection into almost like a comical thing, which I can commend it for. And there are such good parts of this movie, you guys. Like, I know we're looking at this more critically, but once again, I still really love this movie. It has a lot of heart to it with the kids and the mom, and I think that's what you're supposed to focus on. But I would be remiss if we didn't also discuss at least the deeper implications that they set forth with the tropes that they use for their elderly villains, you know? But in The Monstrous Feminine, also by Barbara Creed, it talks about women's depiction as witch as well, and how that's deeply rooted in misogyny and also ableism. I would recommend checking that out. Like I said, these go by like different chapters, but like talking about just different things, different tropes within horror. So it goes into Woman as Witch, and it specifically talks about Carrie within it, and just the power that women had, but the perception that was had towards those women that claimed that power. And I mean, it's just like, Woman as Witch is one of those longer standing tropes, like before even film theory came out. The idea of the old, nasty looking witch is deeply rooted in those much deeper cultural like associations back from when America was first founded, back when, you know, when people believed in this stuff. It wasn't just like folklore, it was actual fear. But yeah, and then that one's on the poop. We'll check in on that one in a bit. But a really great chapter is written by Travis Sutton in Companion to the Horror Film, Avenging the Body, Disability in the Horror Film. Really recommend this book, you guys. But I also love how it relates it to a queer identity as well, and how both of those are directly shown in The Taking of Deborah Logan. But just like a quick little, like, what this chapter is kind of about. This essay identifies disability stereotypes that have been taken up by horror iconography, particularly the obsessive Avenger and the sweet innocent, and how these images serve both the plot and tone of a horror narrative. Additionally, these images reinforce cultural ideas about ability and disability, particularly in the way dominant heteronormative and able-bodied assumptions conflate disability and queerness. And in the Taking of Deborah Logan, you do see that happening. You see there's a shift in like a kind of inside conflict between someone's disability and then their queerness as well. Not Deborah Logan's queerness, but her daughter's more specifically. I know this might seem a little like out there, like why are they connecting disability to queerness? This book does a really good job of like breaking down why that happens, and it comes back to this concept of there being this unspoken heteronormative able-bodied world that just everyone kind of grows up in, but then you get to a crucial point in your life and that othering happens when you realize you're not that, and usually predominantly that happens with queer people and disabled people. Your reality is just not the heteronormative homogenous reality that is portrayed. Isolation is a consequence of able-bodied perceptions. You're different because one or more of your physical attributes doesn't work properly, and that difference makes me uncomfortable but intrigues me at the same time. That's a incentive or motive that I think is more so represented in The Visit than The Taking of Deborah Logan, because in The Taking of Deborah Logan, you're more afraid for her than of her, This combination of discomfort and intrigue does a couple of things. First, the perception of discomfort motivates distance and isolation, and the isolation of the disabled character can make him or her appear as wholly other. Second, with the separation of otherness intact, able-bodied perceptions are free to objectify, usually with objectification of pity, fear, scorn, and so on. In short, objects of spectacle. And that's what The Visit does. It uses the grandparents, or what we think are the grandparents, as objects of spectacle for its horror, instead of the horror being just the narrative itself. The idea in the movie is scary enough. They don't need to necessarily bring it to like a caricature kind of place, because that's almost what the adults in The Visit seem like. They feel like caricatures of disabled people, and I don't like that. Much of the way disability is represented on the movie screen is inherited from literature. Most notably, William Shakespeare's Richard III relies upon the title character's physical deformity to signal his inner depravity. When villainous characters with a disability are given little motivation for their evil behavior, then the horror film seems to fall back on these earlier notions of sin and disability. Meaning that, relating to the William Shakespeare thing, back then people believed that if you were disabled, it was because you weren't close to God. And it kind of brings that back in with The Visit. It's, they aren't normal, they aren't able-bodied in the same way as the kids, and so therefore they are others, therefore they are bad. And they just so happen to be bad. But this movie could, it pushes that stereotypical trope, and I don't enjoy it for that matter, or for that fact. Anyways, let's just dive into The Visit real quick. Again, though, I do recommend it. I do think it's a really good movie. So, written, produced, and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, distributed by Universal Pictures. The budget was $5 million, and the box office, it brought $98.5 million, so not bad. Becca and younger brother Tyler say goodbye to their mother as they board a train and head deep into Pennsylvania farm country to meet their maternal grandparents for the first time. Welcomed by Nana and Pop-Pop, all seems well until the siblings start to notice increasingly strange behavior from the seemingly charming couple. Ed Oxenbould plays Tyler. Great child actors, by the way. Great actors all around. But great child actors. Olivia DeJong is Becca. Deanna DeHugan is Nana. Peter McRobbie is Pop Pop. And Catherine Hahn is Loretta Jameson. We love Catherine Hahn. Love her. So she's not in it a lot, unfortunately, but she does a really good job in this movie. You know, you don't really see her too often in a serious role. So it was nice. All right. So just diving on in. Teenage siblings Becca and Tyler from Philadelphia prepare to spend 5 days with their maternal grandparents while their mother, Loretta, departs on a cruise with her boyfriend.
Girl, I'm chilling again. I'm feeling again. I'm like Iron Man and Batman. I'm a hero again.
Loretta has been estranged from her parents for 15 years due to a past conflict involving her marriage, and her children have never met them. Becca, an aspiring filmmaker, decides to document the visit. Now, I do love, the kind of boom of found footage that we got again, really around like 2015, pretty much. I just think it's a very unique, but also really personal way to bring a narrative to life. And this movie does a good job of having emotional strength to it, but then at the same time, it also doesn't allow for you to get that emotional connection with the grandparents. So it just instantly sets up this idea literally of other. We got to know the siblings really well and got to like them before we are even introduced to the characters of the grandparents. So it's kind of setting you up already to have this and then also with Catherine Hahn's portrayal, very vague, talking about the issues she had with her parents. So it's already setting up this confusion or questioning these characters and their motive or their intentions throughout the film. Upon arrival at the grandparents' isolated farmhouse, the siblings are greeted by the elderly couple, who insist they not leave their bedroom after 9:30 p.m. and avoid the basement. Initially welcoming, Nana and Pop Pop begin exhibiting increasingly disturbing behavior. Nana is seen vomiting at night and behaving erratically, while Pop Pop becomes paranoid and aggressive and hoards soiled diapers in a shed. Becca and Tyler grow concerned as the behavior intensifies.
Here I come.
And they write it off and they explain it in the movie as these very real things like sundowning. And it's pushing that almost like wedge between what a disorder or disability actually is and what people portray it as or what people think of it as. And I think that's a dangerous place to be when you're inserting something that isn't necessarily there, A woman named Stacy, whom the grandparents claim they once counseled, visits the house but is not seen leaving. Tyler hides a camera in the living room, which records Nana attempting to break into the children's locked bedroom with a knife. Becca and Tyler contact Loretta and send her the footage. After viewing it, Loretta informs them that the people they are staying with are not her parents.
Becca, Tyler, just listen to me. Those aren't your grandparents. You've been staying with those people the whole time?
Now that was a goop and a gag, okay? I will say that. You're really kind of suspecting it, and then Catherine Hahn's, portrayal of the mother is so good because you can see, confusion to fear and then to just downright, oh my god, it's so good. It's so good. The children attempt to escape and discover Stacy's body hanging from a tree. Becca enters the basement and finds the corpses of their real grandparents, along with uniforms identifying the imposters as escaped psychiatric patients. Again, we don't need to villainize psychiatric people struggling with stuff like that. Not necessary in my opinion. That's why I like that Taking of Deborah Logan went in such a fantasy kind of way, because if you keep it rooted really in reality, then you're going to be villainizing someone that isn't just a character in your movie, you know? The imposters restrain the siblings. Becca is locked in a room with Nana during a psychotic episode, and Pop Pop torments Tyler by smearing a soiled diaper on his face. Now, mind you, Tyler does have a huge fear of, like, germs and whatnot, I believe. So that was a pretty big deal for him. And that does dive into, like, abjection and whatnot. So I do love that the movie goes there and you're just like, oh my God. Do I think it makes up for everything? No. But it's a great scene. And then he loses his shit. This little kid loses his shit. And, like, the whole movie, you've seen him very bubbly, very just, like, uplifting. His attitude the whole time is just great. And then that scene happens, and he loses all fucking control. Becca kills Nana with a shard of broken mirror and helps Tyler kill Pop Pop by repeatedly slamming his head with a refrigerator door. They escape and are met outside by their mother and police officers. Later, Loretta speaks with Becca about her estrangement from her parents and encourages her children not to hold resentment toward their absent father. Becca chooses to include previously omitted footage of her father in the documentary. Tyler records a rap recounting the events at the farmhouse while Becca observes. The rapping in this is good. It's funny. Like, Tyler's character, as serious of a movie as it is, Tyler's character is like the perfect breath of fresh air that you need for it. But yeah. I know that, you know, we touched on a lot in this one. And I just wanted to open up a conversation about it because I think it's a trope that's used in movies more than we might recognize. And once you start to pick up on those tropes, they're much easier to spot and they're much easier to navigate around without letting the movie like guide your perception of people. You know what I mean? And because like we do need to be conscious that media does have the power to sway people's perceptions on other people. And while I don't think movies, it's their job to do that, I think it's just their job to be a representation of the time that they're made in. I do think that like we're starting to get to that day and age now where we should be more aware of these things. And there's a bunch of other movies that we could talk about it. There was one more so recently called like The Wretched or something. I don't think it's The Wretched, but it came out more recently and it's a mother dealing with Alzheimer's and how her daughter like is conflicting with that, but it still heavily villainizes the old person and says that everyone's lives can't go back to normal until that person is dead. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that message. I think it's very shallow, very heartless, and lacks a lot of sympathy. But I want to know your thoughts, guys. I do. I know this was a bit more of a serious discussion today, but I don't want it to be, you know, anything like that. Like I said, still really love these movies. Still highly, highly recommend them. Yeah, I know you can watch The Taking of Deborah Logan on Tubi for free. I'm not sure about The Visit, though, to be honest with you. It's Universal, so I think they're over on Peacock, I think. So you could probably find it there. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning on in, guys. Let me know your thoughts, all of that. Definitely want to know what you think about the movies, what you thought about just this conversation in general. If you've noticed any of these tropes or if you have any other movie titles that you know of that could kind of fall into these realms. In Companion to the Horror Film, they use ableism and to kind of talk about ageism as well. And they specifically use the movie Freaks to talk about it, which, great movie. But that's more based around like physical disability or deformity. But I think that's still appropriate when talking about aging as well. Because it's kind of like all of that put into one thing. anyways, for the next one is probably just going to be like a basic movie review, and then we'll do another Texas Chainsaw deep dive for the next 3 movies. So the 4th one, the 5th one, and the 6th one we'll be diving into. But yeah, keep an eye out for that, guys. Like and subscribe, all that. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.
Oh, Shania Twain, bitches!